Hello everybody, welcome to part 2 of our Talking Pictures special to mark the 150th birthday of our Josephine locomotive. We left off at the end of 1871 with Josephine, Rose and the rest of the rolling stock still being built in foundries in England. Meantime, back home, construction of the line continued, along with the building of 2 tunnels. Digging had begun in July 1871 when about 20 men started burrowing into the hillside next to the Port Chalmers Hotel. Although gangs worked around the clock, the tunnels would take many months to complete. It was dangerous work, and several fatalities resulted from tunnelling accidents. In October 1871, Robert Carr was working in one of the tunnels when he got caught in a fall of earth and broke some ribs. When he was taken to hospital, he was said to be in a hopeless state, and he died the following day. In January 1872, Robert Johnston and his mates were working on the tunnel between Blanket Bay and Sawyers Bay. They took shelter behind a rock while they waited for an explosive charge to go off. It seemed to be taking a long time, so Johnston raised his head up to see what had gone wrong. As he did so, it went boom, and Johnston was killed instantly when a fragment of rock hit him in the forehead. A couple of months later, around 1 a.m. on the 28th of March, John Long and his mate were setting charges in the Port Chalmers tunnel. Long's mate lit one fuse, and Long lit a match to set a second fuse going, but then he decided he'd better take cover and wait for his mate's charge to go off first, so he dropped his match. After his mate's charge had exploded, Long got up to light his, but the fuse had accidentally ignited, and the charge went off as Long walked towards it. His skull was shattered by a stone that was hurled through the air in the blast. On the other side of the world, Josephine, Rose and the other rolling stock were in the process of being dispatched. On the 12th of March 1872, the Wave Queen sailed from Liverpool with the locomotives, headed for Bristol to pick up the rest of the rolling stock, and then on the 27th of April set off for Port Chalmers. Despite its heavy load and some unfavourable weather, the Wave Queen arrived at Port Chalmers a little over 3 months later, on the 4th of August. Also on board were George Ames and his assistant Fred Gatwood, who would supervise the assembly of Josephine, Rose and the 36 carriages, vans, trucks and wagons. Engine driver John Thomas was likewise on the Wave Queen. He would go on to have a long and distinguished career as an engine driver in Otago, and retired in 1907. Steam was got up for the first time on Josephine on September the 10th, and the locomotive made its first foray along the unfinished track from Port Chalmers to Sawyers Bay and back. On the 17th, Josephine carried the first freight on the line, 3 hogsheads of beer from the brewery to the port. It would be another 3 months before the railway was formally declared open by Governor George Bowen on the 31st of December 1872. Several accidents with fatal consequences occurred along the line in the ensuing years. In July 1873, Angus Macpherson and Edward Edwards, who lived a short way south of Burke's Brewery, were walking home along the line. At a spot known as Wiggins Point, Macpherson was killed when struck by a train driven by Jack Thomas. Thomas Graham had been Jack Thomas's fireman on the early trips along the Port Chalmers line, but very soon became a driver himself. In 1875, Thomas Borland had been using a railway crossing at Hanover Street when he got his foot caught in a cattle stop. Unable to free himself, Borland was killed when struck by the train Tom Graham was driving. Fatalities weren't limited to people caught in the path of oncoming trains. In 1876, Richard Thomas was driving Rose on the main line south towards Balclutha, and at Stony Creek he put his head out of the cab to check something on the side of the locomotive. To his fireman's horror, Richard Thomas disappeared before his eyes as he fell off, possibly after having struck his head on a bridge as they passed over it. Thomas was taken to Stirling to be examined by a doctor. He was alive, but badly concussed, and the doctor ordered that Thomas be transferred to hospital in Dunedin. He was put on a northbound train, but died before reaching the hospital. In 1884, William Ames had a similar mishap. When passing the Stewart Street crossing in Dunedin, he leaned out of the cab of the locomotive he was driving and was knocked to the ground when his head struck an old notice board positioned close to the line. Although unconscious for several minutes, Ames made a full recovery, and the train was only delayed 1/4 of an hour while a replacement driver was sent out. Fortunately, Ames hadn't been travelling very fast on this occasion. He did later boast that on a good stretch of railway he had, more than once, cranked Josephine up to 55 miles or 88 kilometres per hour. Once again, that's all we have time for. Please do come and help us celebrate Josephine's 150th at Labour Weekend. See you then, or see you next time, and thanks for watching.